Co-host privilege. Okay, somebody's recording.
I have started recording and I am going to start over.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let us begin again. We're looking at pattern development and commercial patterns this evening. Now, yesterday, Miss Claire taught us how to sketch, how to do our fashion sketches. This evening, we are going to look at how we move from an actual sketch to a garment. So on screen, you will see a sketch by Miller Hermanovsky. It's a leather gown inspired by the Bauhaus movement. And we are going to be looking at basically how, as a designer, as a fashion student, you can move from your sketch to an actual garment using patterns. Now, how can a designer move from a sketch to a garment? One of the ways is using a 3D flat pattern that was drafted using a computer, or drafting the flat pattern him or herself. So this presentation, our objective is to understand pattern development tools and techniques, understand pattern symbols. We are going to be looking at how we place our patterns on fabrics, pattern layouts as well as look at commercial patterns briefly. Now, what is a pattern? In sewing and fashion design, a pattern is basically a template from which parts of a garment can be traced onto fabric before being cut out or assembled. Now, in our Jamaican situation, when you go to the dressmaker or the tailor, most times you see them mark out the outline of the garment onto the fabric, and then they cut. The pattern is basically that same outline on paper, right? So you place this pattern on the paper and cut around this pattern. Patterns are usually made of paper and are sometimes sturdier. Sometimes sturdier material like cardboard if you want it to last longer, or in our case, we can use cartridge paper, right? Because we tend to use our patterns over and over. Why are patterns important? Well, in our industry, in the garment industry, patterns are used in order to cut the fabric pieces and to make the garment, but they are essential because you can use them to make the same style over and over, so they can be easily duplicated whenever this is needed. And so you doing a pattern, especially in the industry when they need to make thousands of the same style garments. Imagine a t-shirt, a small t-shirt company producing 1,000 t-shirts. Having a pattern is very, very effective because you can now cut out 1,000 t-shirts from one pattern instead of having to draw the outline of that t-shirt on each piece of fabric. You already have it, so it's easy to cut it out. Now, how do we make patterns? We have to start off by taking body measurements. Now, individual body measurements are converted into a series of lines, both straight and curved, on a paper. Now, at the later stage, the lines determine the overall section of the pattern pieces to cut, and eventually we develop a reusable pattern that we can test. And once it is perfect, we have that one for life. Now, some of these measurements are your neck measurements, bust measurements, under bust, the hip, shoulders, arm length, bicep, wrist, basically your entire body. Can someone share with me how it is that you take any one of these measurements? Do you remember from your body measurement classes? Select a body measurement from the list shown on screen and just share with me how you take these body measurements. If you were to explain to someone how to take body measurements, how would you do this? Any volunteer? Any volunteer would like to share? Identify a, go ahead.
The hip height.
Okay, how do you do that one?
You measure the highest part of the bottom.
Yes.
Around it. You bring it around it using the highest part of the bottom.
Okay, I think that one is the hip measurement that you're talking about, and as opposed to the hip height.
Oh, the hip height?
Yes, that's what you said. You said hip height. I think what you just described is how to take your hip measurement.
The hip height you measure from the waist down to the highest part of the bottom.
Ah, very good. Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much. All right, anybody else would like to do another body measurement? Anybody else? All right, since we're not getting any volunteers, let us move on. Now, these are some of our pattern drafting tools. We have drawing pencils and pens, erasers and sharpeners, drafting paper, French curve, transparent rulers, L-square set square tape measures, glue and tape. We need those to hold our pattern pieces in place. Tracing wheel, seam gauge, pins, magnets, and weights help to hold them down onto the table. Scissors, and of course, we need that pattern drafting table. Now, I have a very short video here that I'm going to be playing for you.
My job is to
All right, let me just stop sharing from that screen and share this video with you briefly.
to make college easier because students have a lot of
This one. Confirm for me that you're hearing sound. Are you hearing the sound from the video?
Yes, miss.
It's Margaret from Let's Learn to Sew. And in order to go ahead and kick off our series that's going to just lay out some fundamentals of pattern making, I want to do a quick video sharing with you some of the tools that you're going to find useful as you go through this series with me. Some of these are optional, and some of them are ones that you're really going to need. And along the way, I'll try to give you some tips and tricks for some things that you can interchange so that you don't have to spend a lot of money on supplies. First thing you're going to need is some type of paper to draft your patterns out on. This is very similar to medical table exam paper. You can use any type of craft papers, and having something that's see-through is going to make it easier. You can also use a mid-weight interfacing. I know some people that use the backside of gift wrapping paper. You want to make sure that it is wide enough to use. I find using either the interfacing, the medical exam paper works great. We're going to be transferring and tracing, so having something that's see-through is helpful. Yardstick is really handy. Clear ruler is very, very helpful. I would pretty much say that a clear ruler is almost a necessity. Optional are going to be your styling rulers and hip curve. I'll show you some different ways to get those curved edges if you don't have them. The other ruler that I absolutely love, but again, this is not a must. This is like a French curve ruler, but any of these widths are 5/8. This makes adding your seam allowance super easy. I'll show you several ways to do it if you don't have one. A seam gauge can be used for your seam allowance if you don't have one of these rulers. I'll also show you how to use your clear ruler for adding in a seam allowance if you don't have something else. Both of these are great to have. You are going to need some kind of tracing wheel. The one with the little spikes works a lot better than the one that you get in a traditional sewing kit. This is an adjustable one. You can move these two brackets in and out of several different locations. When they are towards the middle, it is exactly 5/8. Again, something like this is going to allow you to transfer markings, and it's going to make putting your seam allowance in easier. Seam ripper is super helpful when we start doing our muslin. An awl works great. If you don't have one, I'll show you a couple other things that you can use, but these are pretty inexpensive, and you're going to find that it's useful for a lot of things. So this is one of those items that I would suggest picking up if you don't have one. A notcher, that's going to help you to make your markings. Scotch tape is useful, but not necessary. This helps when we're marking our darts out. Okay, and of course,